Okay. Okay, and welcome everyone to another DNN Community Hangout. I'm here again this week with Will Strohl, and we're going to be talking about some exciting stuff this week. Welcome back, Will.
Hey, Joe. It's great to be back. I'm great to be here for another hangout.
Yes, we're looking closer and closer to the old Dan Haggerty photos, I think, for those from the 1970s reference. Grizzly Adams there, my co-host for the week. How's it going, man? I hear you went out east for Christmas and got a little bit of a break. And welcome back, sir.
Well, until you said, shoot, I'm getting over being sick right now, like very, very sick. But until you said whatever the character's name was, I didn't know what you're talking
Grizzly
about.
Adams, yes.
Grizzly Adams, thank you. But yeah, me and my daughter, we went out east and spent the Christmas holiday out in South Carolina. We had a very interesting time getting back though. We had it was the best flight and everything getting there, and then getting back, we got stuck in Dallas for 2.5 days. They completely shut down the airport. The day we got there was 80 degrees. The day we left, it was snowing. So it was really weird. They had 11 tornadoes within 2 hours and flooding and stuff. It was like we weren't supposed to come home. It was crazy.
Nice. Yeah, no, that's a great way to welcome you for the holidays, huh?
Yeah.
No.
And by the way, like that trip wasn't possible without some people, and they know who they are. And I want to thank some people out there, some DNN angels. So thank you, folks.
Yep. No, definitely. It's one of the things that I really love about this community is the way they pull together. Yeah. So speaking of community, we got some big things going on this week. So I think that's what we're here to talk about today. We don't have a special guest, so I guess we'll just have to make this focused all about DNN rather than some guests that we bring in.
Yep. Our guest today is DNN 8. But before we get to that, I do want to kind of tease out some stuff. So we do have, we purposely aren't putting together news today. We want to make this completely about DNN 8. Although I'll try to see if I can put some stuff in the show notes of some things that are interesting that you might need to know about. And I do owe everybody a post for the last hangout. I haven't been able to get to it yet with all the holidays and being sick and everything, but I'll get them both out in the same day probably. But our next hangout's going to be a DNN Con interview. So DNN Con's coming up fast. It's in April 1st and 2nd and in Baltimore. And so we're going to be talking to the folks behind DNN Con next month. And then the month after that, we're going to be talking to David Poindexter. So if you remember, that was supposed to be our interview in November, and we kind of postponed that until this next month. But we postponed him one more time, and he's okay with that, to March. We are looking for folks for April. Maybe we'll talk to the DNN Connect folks. I'm sure they'll be more than willing. But other than that, we are looking for guests to come onto the show following that. Outside of that, yeah, I think we're good to go. So I guess we can talk to DNN 8 now.
Yeah, I think there's, even as we make the run up to DNN 8 this week, so we are going to be releasing later this week. For those who've been paying attention online, I think people saw an RC go out yesterday afternoon. May have been evening time for those in Europe. But we did release an RC yesterday, so we are very, very close. It's been a long time coming getting to this point. There's been a lot of things that we've worked on over the last year, and what I really wanted to talk about and show people today is some of the we've talked over and over again about some of the big things like MVC and SPA development, right? And even have talked quite a bit about the dynamic content creator, which unfortunately we had to postpone and are not going to be able to release it with DNN 8. But there are a lot of other nice features that we added in DNN 8 for developers and for designers. And we've been pushing all the way up even, we've got a couple of changes that have to go in today post RC. We got some feedback. So we really are pushing to get a lot of stuff in DNN 8. And so So I thought today this would be a really good time to talk about some of those new developer features and sort of maybe show people, how to take advantage of them and what they are, and talk to them a little bit. One of the things that I've been heads down on for the last month or two, and we still have about a week left till we're ready to completely unveil it, is a new DNN documentation center. So we're going to start small, going to move some documents over right away. DNN 8 specific stuff we'll put in there right away, and we'll start growing that. So you should see more and more documents come into the documentation center week over week, and eventually the goal is to move a lot of the content that we've had in the wiki and move it over to documentation center, and to start consolidating rather than having people go to an API reference here and a online help there and go over to the wiki and maybe go to the blogs. We really want one central place where community and commercial users can go to get all the documentation, whether you're an administrator, a designer, or a developer. We really want one place for people to get all the information about how to use DNN and leverage it to its fullest capacity. So everything we're going to talk about today will be coming up in the documentation center. Some of it will get out there by launch day. The others may take a week or two until it's fully out there, but we'll get it out there pretty darn quick. So before
we move forward, too far forward, Joe, you mentioned a lot of things here. So for the people that aren't in the know, what happened to the dynamic content creator, and can we still expect it?
Yeah, so that feature hasn't gone away. One of the things that like we talk a lot about design, and in the design world, one of the things you do quite often is you do 2 or 3 iterations on a design, or 2 or 3 versions of a design, and then you pick one and you start iterating on it, and you may get, partway down the design and say, oh, that's really just not working. It's not coming together. The interactions aren't right. And so you'll back up and say, okay, let's take another run at this, right? And you'll keep going through that iterative process until you get to the design you want. And then once you have the design and you like the interactions, then you'll go and you'll start building something that actually implements that design. And we're trying to move to something a little more akin to that on the developer side, because often when you're putting in really big, beefy features, you may architect something, you may start down a path architecturally and from a development perspective, and get to a certain point and realize that is not going to do everything you wanted it to do, and it was going to be too hard under that architecture to modify it for future features that you have planned. And so that's sort of where we got to with the dynamic content creator. We didn't want to release it and then have to, in the very next release after that, go and make some breaking changes or go do things that were going to cause us to have to change the architecture underneath. So we would rather postpone the feature, go back, revisit those architectural decisions, and really get the foundation correct, or what we believe is right based on our usage of the previous iteration. And so we're really doing that tweaking behind the scenes rather than putting it out there and then potentially breaking people's site or causing upgrade issues, things like that. So just a delay, not a cancellation of that feature.
Cool. And something I failed to do in the beginning, like I often do, is if anybody has questions, make sure you just you can tweet us. You can put them in the comments below the Hangout if you're watching on the Hangout page. Tweet Joe at Brinkman, or use the hashtag DNN Hangout. Or you can, better yet, you should tweet me, because Joe's going to be presenting. He's probably not going to be looking. And so tweet me at Will Strohl, and I'll get those questions asked for you.
Yeah, so you know, even beyond just the stuff that we're doing for DNN8. So there are a lot of things going on right now. We've got a module contest that should wrap up at the end of the month, and we still have some more information to put out about that so that people can actually give their contributions or give us their information about the modules they're building. I know some people are working really hard to get their modules done. I've seen some of them already. They're looking awesome, by the way. And I know there's still some others coming in. I saw something just yesterday and today, even coming from one of the guys. So we're doing something internally at DNN Corp as well, so that we can get our engineers involved rather than being part of the bigger module contest. We wanted to do something internally. And I saw David Rodriguez had actually put something out, and we'll get a link to it in the show notes. But it's actually Windows Azure or Microsoft Azure has this thing called App Insights, and it's a way to log data. Kind of think of it like Splunk or Google Analytics, where you can log data to this analytics store, and then you can go back later with analytics tools and analyze that data, analyze events or things that are going on the site. So he's got a new module and a couple of new providers that he's built out to allow you to take all of your DNN error logs, all of your event logs, page activity, like when you went to a page, links you might have clicked or whatever, and push all of that stuff up to App Insights, so you can really start to see some things that are going on your site, but it's all sort of in one location, and you can sort of query it and report on it and do all these interesting things with it. So really looking forward to seeing that in action. I know David's got a blog, probably will be out later today, that covers a lot of that stuff. But you know, there's just a lot of really interesting stuff that I'm seeing people do around the DNN8 platform. So that's one that I'm really looking forward to. But with that, I thought today I pulled out like 5 new developer and designer features that I want to talk about today. And there's one last one, which is not really a feature, but it's a big breaking change in DNN8. And we're going to talk about these more this week. I've blogged about them before, but we'll talk a little bit about Telerik today. And since that's really the biggest change from a breaking change perspective in DNN8, so we'll talk about that today as well. So that's sort of what's on tap. So with that, let me go ahead and share my screen out here, and we'll go ahead and make sure. So we'll start that. Let me make sure I get everything. So, okay. And I should be screen sharing. You should be seeing DNN8 on my screen here. Can you see that okay, Will?
Yeah, we see your web browser with DNN8.
Awesome. So yeah, so DNN8, just when you first come into it, and we're not going to talk a lot about this, but we do have a new skin for DNN8. The template here is kind of the same. We're going to talk more about the skin and stuff on Thursday at the actual launch webinar, so I'm not going to really talk about that much here. But just know, as you're seeing maybe some minor subtle UI differences, it is because I'm actually running the RC here, so you're seeing some different things. So I'm going to do, in order to start talking about some of these new features, what I want to do is I'm going to actually open up. Let me open up some Visual Studio Code here, just because I'm going to copy some things in, and we'll sort of do this interactively, so to speak, but we'll do it interactively inside DNN. And hopefully my DNN sites will speed up a little bit here. I know sometimes when I'm running screen sharing, it can bog down my machine just a tad.
Are you saying that on occasion you have PC issues?
No, I wouldn't say that, Will. I know it's a common refrain lately, and I'm not sure why this machine seems to be having those issues more often than not, but it does. So with that, let's see if I can get my machine to respond for me here. And let me just refresh this other site. Some of this I know is just getting DNN warmed up. So we'll let this come together. So we're going to use actually the DNN module creator. So this is a module that was created by Sean Walker a few years back. And it's nice when you're building, just doing some little one-off or real simple development. If I can get DNN to cooperate here.
That comes in the default install, right? That used to.
It does come in the default install. So one of the things that we did in DNN 8 is we separated out all the admin modules into separate modules. So ironically, the module creator originally came into DNN as a separate module, and then a year or two ago we incorporated it as a core part of the platform, and then just in DNN 8 we moved it back out to a separate module along with all the other administrative features, which means ultimately that you can go to host extensions and uninstall all those other modules if you want to do that. So, but anyway, we'll go ahead and add the module creator here on the page, and I'm going to, hopefully this won't, we won't continue to have problems. I think we'll be okay. Yeah, we'll be okay since DNN's warmed up at this point. I'm just going to look for that module creator. We'll go ahead and drop that on our page. It's going to ask us for a few pieces of information here. There we go. My organization name. We're just going to call this Hello World. And we're just going to use this as sort of the basis for exploring some of the features today. And I've got a couple of them I want to talk about. So this is a great, and we'll also get to see some existing DNN features in action that people may not know about. So we'll cover a bunch of bases here today. So we'll let that spin up. And so it created a new module for me. And it looks like it's picking up something that I may have cached once before. So this is not normally what you would see, but it's fine because that's what I wanted people to, what we're ultimately going to demo with. So I've got a module, it says hello super user. So it's actually picking up what my user account is up here, right? Just picking up the user info.display name. And what I want to do, and let me just make sure that it hasn't picked up a bunch of other files in here because I really don't want, okay, yeah, so it's only got these few files, right? The ASCX. Let me make sure the CS is okay on the back end so nothing blows up on me. I don't think it will. Yeah, okay, this is fine. This is exactly what I want. So what I want to do is I'm going to package this up. So I've got my basic module here. I'm going to go ahead and create a package because one of the first features that I want to talk about is when we started separating all these modules out that were administrative modules, we found very quickly that it was repetitive trying to get these modules inserted into the admin and host menu. And what would typically happen is you would write a bunch of code and it would be boilerplate code, and you would want to inject a new page with correct permissions, and you want to drop your module onto that page and put it either in admin or put it in host, and then you want to do something in the menu for admin and host to make sure if it's a common module or not a common module that it gets in the right place. So there were all these things that you had to do in code before. And having separated out a bunch of modules, we said that's an awful lot of work. People really shouldn't have to do that. We should be able to make that much easier for people. So what we did is we actually have this section that can go in your module manifest. Let me zoom in here a little bit so it's a little easier. Come on, There we go. Oh, maybe too much there. There, that's better. So yeah, so we've got this new section that's going to go in the manifest, and it basically says, hey, we're going to create a page in DNN, and we're going to put it, it's going to be a host page, and we want it to show up in that common tab in DNN, and the name of the page is going to be Hello World. We've got our icons for the page and a description for all of that. So I'm just going to copy this out, and I'm going to put it there in my manifest. So if you noticed, I just used inside the module developer there, the module creator. And so right after this supported features here, we're going to go ahead and drop in this segment right there. Right. So all I'm doing is just dropping in these 6 lines of XML into my manifest, and it basically now, when I go and I finish this up, it's going to go ahead and create a package for me. I'm going to get rid of the organization name. So it's going to create my manifest, and then we're going to give it the Hello World install zip. It's going to create the package for me, all of that, right? So if you ever wondered, like, how do you create the manifest? How do you build a package if you're new to DNN, or you just want a quick way to churn out a module? The module creator is really nice for doing things like this. So we'll go ahead and let that churn away and crank out a package. And in the background, it actually dropped that zip file, that module package, in our install modules folder. So then I'm going to come over here to a second site that I have, and let's take a look at the host menu. We've got our typical dashboard extensions, right? All of the typical stuff. So I'm going to go here to my extensions, and I'm just going to say, okay, let's import that module that we just created, and let's go ahead and install that. So we'll get our extensions page opened up here. We'll go ahead and say install that extension. And now we'll just go grab that extension here as soon as my page renders.
So this is a separate site? I think I missed that.
Yeah, so this is a separate site. So my first site, this is the one where the module, where I played around with creating the module. So this is my second site now. So I'm just going to show you what it's like when I install this thing.
And so you're about to demonstrate that using that little snippet of code you're going to
yeah, that little snippet of code, and what does that actually do on your site, right? So I'm going to come in here. I know this is actually a test site, and our test site was DNN 800RC. Remember, I said it created it in the installs module folder, right? So if we look here, let me know if this zooms in okay, Will. I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah, that's better than what it was.
Yeah, so so you can see here that we've got our Hello World module that's in our RC install modules folder. So let's go ahead and just grab that, open that up. We'll step through the installs here. That'll take just a second. And we'll just click next through here. And notice it doesn't have things like release notes and README. When you're doing quick and dirty modules, you know, that may be one-offs or something for your website, maybe a little utility module or whatever. You don't always build those out, but you could. I mean, the module creator doesn't prevent you from having all of those features. So don't think you can't do that. Just for purposes of the demo today, I didn't do that. So now the module is installed, and what notice here, it created a host page for us. It added the module into that host page for us. And so what we'll see when this is finished refreshing that site, then we'll see under that host menu. And remember, I said I want this, right? I want this to be a common module. I want it to show up under the host page in that common tab. So when this is
so there's two things to that. Like when we first in the control panel, you know, when we first split that out into common, advanced, or common and less common, and all that, like it was very cool. And like one of my first questions was, hey, can we put anything into common when we install? And I was told no. And so that meant you had to run a bunch of code and you know, when you install your module. And that code wasn't necessarily code that the average person would know how to do immediately. But the other thing too is that so I'm saying that to say this: the very fact that you can do that, and especially with just a couple lines of XML, is awesome. But the thing that I have a question about is does that mean that the default control panel is dedicated for some foreseeable future to be the way it is still?
No, we're actually later in 2016 we'll be changing the control panel and really rethinking the administrative interface. But even then, we'll still make sure that extensions like this, that you have a way to extend that future control panel, whatever that looks like.
So common will still mean something then.
Yeah, common will still mean something. It may have an analog in the new world, but and we'll figure that out as we start developing out those features. But I don't expect what we're doing here to go away or to change too much for a while yet. Okay, so now this first top tab is our common tab. This would be our advanced settings, right? So common settings up top, advanced settings in the second one. And now we've got our new Hello World page, right? So this is our Hello World. So now it created it, it put it in the common tab. We're going to Hello World now, and we'll see, okay, here's my module, right? So I created it in this RC, in this first one here. You can see this because it's my module dev, right? So, and it's visible by administrators. Over here in my actual Hangout folder, notice I only have home. Right now I'm on the host Hello World page, right? So now I've got my module there, everything's cool. So that's really, like, there's not a lot to this feature, but the thing that it does for a developer is really cool, because like you said, it was a lot of code before, and I don't think even you realized, and I didn't before we started working on the feature, that everything that was in common, both in host and admin, was hard coded in the core of DNN. So even if you wanted to put something there, it just would not have been possible. But now we've opened that up, and it's completely driven off of some metadata information. I believe, and I'd have to go check, but I believe it's available on page settings, that there's a tag that you can reference there. But for now, really, you really shouldn't care about that. You can just drop it in your manifest, and you're good to go. So that's feature number one, which I think is pretty cool. But let's talk about, so let's move beyond just the manifest, right? So one of the other features that we added is when you think about profile properties for users, right? One of the profile properties that you have is your profile image and your avatar, right? And when we introduced this a few years back, I think in DNN 6, we introduced a handler, an image handler for the profile picture, so that you could actually have a profile picture and have it sized appropriately for different usages. So like on the user account bar up here, you know, it's a really small picture. When you go to the profile page, it's a bigger picture. But what if you wanted to do resizing of images in your own module, not just your profile picture, but any image, right? You had to write your own code to do that. And typically what would happen is people would do things like they would just change the HTML or change the CSS, meaning you would start with this really massive file, and you would change the CSS and the browser would scale it on the fly. But if you started with a file that was, say, 2 megs in size, even if you just had a small 16 by 16 pixel image, after scaling, you still had to download the full 2 meg file. And like Profile Picture Handler is smart enough to do the scaling on the server and only send you down the size file that you actually have requested. So if you say I need a 16 by 16 image, it'll give you that. If you say I need a 32 by 32, it'll give you that size, right? And so you get down just the bytes over the wire. So from a performance perspective, it's really cool, right? So let's go ahead, and I'm going to use the same module creator features that we used before. I'm going to use a little bit different part of that, and it's under the module action menu. I'm going to go to develop, and that's going to pull up the code for this module. And so I'm going to look at that initial code here, and I'm just going to make a minor tweak to this, and I'm just going to add an image handler. And so we added this in DNN 8, and this was actually from a community member, Torsten Wegen, who's also a DNN MVP. And so in this case, I've got this image handler, and it's the DNN image handler. It's replaced the profile pic for DNN. And here we've got a mode on the image handler. It says, show me the profile picture. Show it to me for user ID 2. So I went ahead, Will, and I created a user account for you on this website, and I put your profile picture up there, and we're going to just display that really, really large.
Can't wait.
And you know, because I think it's really a really awesome profile picture that you have. And so we'll just go ahead and update that, and we'll save that, and then refresh our page underneath. And what we should get is we should get
anything to be better looking than the current profile pic.
Well, yeah, no, and I'm really liking the new profile picture there. I think that's a really good look for you there, Will. You know, the abs, I see you've been doing your crunches and stuff, so looking really sharp. But you know, that's sort of modern. You know, if we're going to talk Superman, you know, I'm one of these guys who's more of a classic Superman myself. You know, back in the 60s, I know that's before your time and before other people's time. You know, we really Superman it really should be I think black and white, grayscale. Oops. So we'll just go ahead and paste. So the nice thing about this image handler is we can have all kinds of different filters that we put on the images, and we really don't want Will looking up and to the left. It looks like he's looking off the page, so we're going to actually say we're going to use a different filter here, and we're going to flip rotate filter here, and we're going to say we want to rotate none, and we want to flip in the X direction, and we'll just go ahead and update that. And so what that should do is it should make that a grayscale image for us, and then have you actually look in the other direction. So we'll see if we can, if we get all of that correct. That should just refresh the page here quickly. I must have missed something on that flip rotate. That's okay. We'll get that. So this is one of the other features of that image handler, is that you can actually have, and you could actually keep extending the image handler with custom filters as well. So you can do gamma is already built in, contrast and sharpness. So you can do all kinds of different things with that image. And it's all done server side, right? You use a tag on the client side here for your image. but all of the actual image manipulation happens server side and then gets saved in a cache and sent down from that cache. So if I refresh the page, it doesn't have to rebuild the image. It can just pull it from cache and reserve that image up. So that's really nice. So there are a lot of other features available with this, and we'll put a link in the show notes to some of the documentation that was originally uploaded with the image handler that Torsten did. We're going to be updating that documentation. That will be part of the documentation center, so that'll be something that comes here soon. Anyway, I think just
about this profile picture, and I just want to address it and get it out of the way. No, I'm not Superman, and no, that is a green screen. I can't fly out there. All right.
Okay. Yeah, well, but those are your abs, right? That's not fake.
I did not say those weren't my abs.
Okay. As long as we get that out there. So yeah, so there is we'll put this link out in the show notes. I do have a link here. It shouldn't have been flip rotate. It should have been rotate flip. That was the problem. So okay, so now we've talked about the manifest. We've got our new image handler here, and we can do some really cool stuff with the image handler. We've shown a couple here. There are many other modes. It's not just for profile pictures. You can do it for files out of the file system as well, and lots of other modes that the image handler handles for you. So you can do some really good image manipulation, simple stuff, cache, high performance, all of that. So next thing I want to talk about is, but what if I wanted to say, I wanted some settings for my module now. So I want to do something different with settings. And if you went and looked, the way we used to handle settings for modules before, now we're still going to have a settings page where you go and click something and make a change, right? Update a text box or what have you. But how do you actually call the database or call the backend to store your data and to retrieve the settings data, right? Because you might have module settings, you might have tab module settings, you might have portal settings. And what you typically would get back in the DNN API was a dictionary, and a dictionary of strings. And then it was up to you to say, oh, this is a Boolean value, convert this true false string or this 1-0 string or this yes no string, convert that string into an actual 0-1 Boolean value, right? And so littered all over your code, you would have all of this code to do all of these conversions for you. And you had to know, okay, I need to convert this to Boolean. Or if you didn't remember what the type of some setting was, you had to go look it up and figure all that out. And so Peter Donker said, that's a lot of work for something that we do, that we interact with so much when we're doing module development. Why can't we have a strongly typed class for my settings? And why can't we just reference that strongly typed class and save that class? We could still use under the covers the module settings table or the portal settings table or the tab module settings table, right? We don't want to change how it's stored. What we want to do is not have to worry about all this conversion code to get it in the right, whether it's a string or a Boolean or what have you, right? So we're going to make some modifications here. Again, we're going to use the module developer. And first thing I want to do is, yeah, Will?
As you're starting with this, I do want to just let you know that, give you a time check here. You got through 2 or 3 of the features that you wanted to talk about so far, and you got just over 15 minutes left.
Yeah, we're gonna speed this up a little bit. So I'm gonna go ahead. Let's go ahead and add a file here, and we're going to add just a class file, and we're gonna call that settings. Ignore that. We're just gonna call it settings. .cs. Yeah, we'll just call it settings and go ahead and create that. And that's going to create a CS file for me. And we'll go ahead and go. And I may need to, yeah, there it is. And so while that's loading, I actually have my settings CS here. Come on. And so there are a couple of things we're going to do in settings. So we've got our main settings class here. I've just got one setting that we have. It's color with a getter and setter, and this module setting attribute that allows me to set a prefix, right? So if this goes in the module settings table, I need to know my color setting for my module is not going to overwrite the color setting for some other modules, right? So I give it a prefix. If I had web config set up for C#6 compilation for the Roslyn compiler, then I could use a new C#6 feature. Right now I don't have that. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a settings repository. So this is new. This uses the new DAL 2 that we introduced like in DNN 7, I think. We're just going to say, hey, we're going to take these Hello World settings class and we're going to create a repository for it. And then I'm also going to take and create a new portal module base that's going to load up that Hello World settings, right? So it's going to call my repository, pass it in the configuration for this module, and we're going to get a settings back. So all of these, I'm just going to load all three of these classes in my module here. And if I can get this to actually load for me, there we go. Go ahead and just push all those in. And assuming I didn't, oh, nope. I'm missing something here. Let me just make sure I got all of my, okay, yeah, no, it's not inside the right namespace. So just a second, I need to fix this. This, almost had my failure here. So that should go in there, that's right.
Well, in related news, Joe, David Rodriguez just now posted his blog post about the module you're talking about.
Good. Yeah, no, it's. I had a chance to talk with David about it earlier, and I think that's going to really be a nice module for people. I think
I just retweeted it.
So that we'll save that settings. Then the other thing we're going to want to do. So once you've done the settings, and we'll skip through this because it's taken a little while to do the page refreshes over on the DNN site. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to change the base class, right, so that I get the Hello World base. We'll go ahead with the ASCX is now I'll start calling. Right now I can just say, give me settings.color because it's strongly typed. Then I can say, okay, show the grayscale or don't show grayscale, right? So with just a few changes here now, I can look at my settings.color. In my ASCX, we would, in my settings, we would go ahead and create a checkbox back there for the color. And then finally, we would have a simple value that says, load up my module settings from the Hello World settings repository, right? So the thing that we created just a minute ago, that settings repository, and we would get the values out of there, and then we could use that directly, module settings.color. So everywhere where we're actually referring to the setting, we're actually using a strongly typed class, right? Which is really nice, real easy. You're going to get IntelliSense support if you're doing it in Visual Studio and all of that. Notice here, I never say save this value also, right? So I just say take this value, combo color or checkbox color dot checked, and store it in module settings. And under the cover, the DNN framework knows to go ahead and then update the database with this. And so it will go back and save that setting in the database for us automatically. So all of this, we can skip past so we can get to some of these other demos actually seeing this. But trust me, when you make all of those changes, what you're going to get is the ability to work and interact with those settings. And it's really much nicer, a lot less code to use the new settings. And really the only thing special that we did was create our original class, right? We created this settings class, that's new. And we created this repository class, that's new. Everything else is just calling the repository to get my settings and then using those settings directly. So it really is a very, very nice feature, and I'm really happy with the way this turned out. Ernst Peter and the guys at Access did some work on some of the base implementation. Peter Donker took that and ran with it a little bit further, and we went back and forth on it, and I think that the feature turned out really nice.
And that's pretty awesome. I've done something like that before, and it took a lot of work, but it was very specific to what I was doing too. So like to have that out of the box is pretty nice.
Yeah, and we'll get a code sample when I'm done today. I'll throw the Hello World example up so people can actually see the full module and can play with it. So we'll get that in the show notes as well. I'll just throw it up in a sample up on GitHub so that you can actually play it and see what the module does. It's the features are not really important. It's how you interact with that settings. You can see an example of working settings right now in the HTML module. So the HTML module is the canonical example for DNN of using these settings. And there are a number of different things that we do in there. So go check out the HTML module in DNN 8 and you'll be able to see that. So the next thing that we wanted, and this is one that was driven by some of the designers in the community, working specifically Timo and some others, and Peter Donker again. His name keeps coming up a lot. So the next feature is really around CSS and default CSS specifically. And what we wanted to be able to do was to say, how do we create a framework, right? Because we've had for a long time a problem with default CSS in that anytime you want to make changes to it, it really becomes problematic with doing things in a backwards compatible manner, right? And so that's really been hard, and we've struggled with that in DNN 6. We did some changes and we broke some things. We did it again in DNN 7, and again we broke some things, and neither time we weren't trying to be breaking changes, but it's just so convoluted to make CSS changes in a foundational class like that, or a foundational style sheet like that, and not have it break a skin somewhere, or break a module somewhere. So what we did in DNN 8, we said, well, we broke it in 6, we broke it in 7. Let's do something for 8. But we don't want to break it
in 8 again. Is that what you're saying?
What's that?
We're breaking it in 8 again. Is that what you're saying?
No, we are not breaking it in 8 again. We are not.
I understand. That's what we expect, right?
Well, we want to make changes, but we want to make changes in a way that we allow designers to have more control over whether this actually does break things or not. We've moved where the default CSS lives. It's no longer in the old location. It's in a new location. All of the APIs for making sure it gets put on the page are same APIs. We still register it the same way, say we need a style sheet. But now it's in this shared style sheets location and the style sheet is called DNN default. And we have a version number, right? Version number 7. And So in this case, we have the exact default CSS from DNN 7 is included in DNN 8. But you know what? There is also a DNN 8 style sheet as well. And we can come in here and we can say this file in this path has this canonical name DNN default. So I could call this, you know, Joe. It doesn't have to be called DNN default. Regardless of what that path is up there in the file path, I can just say, hey, this is Joe. Or I can say this is the Bootstrap CSS, right? So I could have Bootstrap in here as well. But we could call it Joe or Will or what have you. And then we can give it a name. So I can say in my module, I have Bootstrap, and it's a version 6.8 or 3.0 or 4.0, whatever, right? And I can say, you know what? I absolutely always want this version to be loaded. I don't care what anyone else on the page says. We're going to load this. And this is really, this force version is really there so that theme designers can say, hey, I absolutely need the DNN default to be 7, or I need the DNN default to be 8, and I'm going to take responsibility over setting up all of my classes based on that default, right? And so this is new, right? So the version, the name, the force version, these are all new attributes. We had CSS include before. So you could do all of this before and include a CSS. The location for the DNN default is also new. So now we have a version 7. We actually ship with both a version 7 and a version 8 default CSS. It's possible in 8.01 or 8.1 or 8.2 that we may have an even newer version of default CSS. And the nice thing is that a skin can say, this is the version of default CSS that I work with, and I want you to use that. Or I work with 7, but I've tested an 8, so use whichever one you want, right? So now we've put some control in the hands of skin designers or theme designers. Sorry, the new terms always stick with me. But they can now control what CSS is going to be used.
So the defining portion here, though, because this is again something that we already are using for various reasons, but the defining portion here is the name. Is that right? So when you put DNN default in there, that'll override the default CSS.
That'll override the default CSS.
Okay.
In the core platform, we actually register the default style sheet as this name. So this is, now we don't use the markup, we actually use code, but we register this name in the core platform. But if you were to drop this in and say, I want to use 8 because my mod or my skin works with 8, but it doesn't work with 7, you could drop this into your skin and it would force it to move to 8. Now, in the core platform, in the RC, we're using 8.0. We wanted to do some testing and see what skins and things we're going to break. In the final build, and I've got to verify, but my understanding is that the core platform, when we launch on Thursday, it will be defaulting to 7. So if you had a skin built on 7, it should run without any issues in DNN 8, even though we have a 7 and an 8 version. So we'll clarify that in the show notes, but yeah, so that should work. So the other thing is, if you can include a file and you can say, hey, put the default CSS, the other thing that skinners, that theme designers wanted to be able to do was say, you know what, just get rid of default CSS altogether. It's causing too many conflicts. There are too many things marked important that I have to override, and it's too convoluted. I just want to get rid of it. I want complete control. So you could actually go into DNN, and you could say, okay, in my skin. So this is the homepage skin in the new Exelon skin for DNN 8. And I modified it. This is not in DNN 8. This is something I modified. And I added in this new thing. Notice this DNN CSS exclude tag. So this is new. Not only do we have a CSS exclude, we have a JavaScript exclude as well. And basically what I'm saying is look for this thing named DNN default, and I want to exclude that from being rendered. And so what will happen is when this runs through the client resource manager, the last step before rendering the page, it's going to say, hey, do I have any, what are all my includes? What are all the files that should be there? And then it's going to say, okay, I've got my list. And then it's going to run through and say, what exclusions do I have? And it's going to remove those from the list. So if I drop this in like it is here into my page, it would actually prevent DNN or default CSS from getting rendered. So I would have no default CSS, which for some designers is exactly what they want, right? So that's what I think is a really nice feature for designers. And I know that Timo had some custom skin objects that could do something similar before. And we worked with him, worked with Peter Donker. This is now part of the core platform. And this actually, we made changes at the root of client resource management. So now it's baked in to the client resource management framework, which is really nice.
And to be clear for anybody who might know about that skin object that Timo maintains, like this is just one feature in there. That there's still lots of other things that
absolutely. There are definitely some other things that he provides. This is only one, and this was something because we wanted a little more control. I mean, the exclusion is just one aspect of default CSS management, right? The other aspect being versioning and being some of the other stuff that we have in the core platform. And then Timo adds a bunch of other things in his skin object as well. So so that's here. So the next feature that I want to talk about, the last real feature I'm going to talk about, is something called Java or JavaScript Web Tokens, JWT. And there's a nice site out there, jwt.io, and it will talk about these tokens, what they are, why we use them, or JSON Web Tokens, not JavaScript Web Tokens. So JSON Web Tokens, right? And they're really just a way to pass data back and forth in an encoded manner. And you use these tokens typically in a authentication scenario, but you can do a lot of different things with them. It doesn't just have to be around authentication, but it allows you to pass claims securely back and forth. Claims being things like this person is part of that role, or they can do these certain things on the site. They may have certain permissions. You don't have to worry about them getting modified or stuff in transit, right? So so JWT. So a couple of things. So we were going to originally include a couple other authentication mechanisms in DNN for web services. And again, like with the dynamic content creator, we found architecturally they just weren't doing what we wanted. And we had some architectural challenges with the implementations. And so we did some more research, and one of the guys did a spike around JWT, and we found that the primary use case that we wanted authentication for was around mobile app authentication. How do you write a mobile app, have it authenticate against a DNN web service so that it can call web services that require a specific known logged in user, right? And you want to be able to do that without mucking around with cookies and dealing with web forms cookies and a bunch of other things that you traditionally would have had to jump through hoops to do with web services prior to that in DNN. So JWT, new service that's added in DNN 8. By default, it is not in DNN 8, or it's not installed in DNN 8 out of the box. You have to actually go to the extensions tab. We'll see if this may have gone to sleep already. Go to the extensions tab and go to the installed extensions, or available extensions, I mean. So if you go to installed, you won't see it here. It is a provider type. So if we go to available extensions, I'm going to come down here to my providers, and we'll see I've got this JSON or the DNN JWT auth handler, and this adds another authentication handler type into DNN. It will also add some or update some things in web config for you. We had 3 different types of authentication handlers that were installed before. We had a basic authentication handler, we had a digest authentication handler, and we had a web forms based DNN authentication handler. And they were hard coded in the core platform. You couldn't alter them. You couldn't say, oh no, don't use basic or don't use digest. They were always there. And we wanted this new one, but we didn't want to hard code it because we didn't necessarily want to expose this JWT on all endpoints just because you upgraded to DNN 8. We want people to have more control over their authentication handlers. So, so you actually have to install this, and then there's then you'll have a place in the web config where you can then go and update. And let me see if I've got this here. I don't know if my this version of my web config has this or not. Let me see if we've added it. Oh, keep searching. Maybe all the way down at the bottom. Keep going. Come on. Sorry. Yeah, no, I think it gets added when we do that auth. I'll need to go verify where that's showing up in the web config. We'll put that in the show notes. So anyway, once you have that, what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to update. So this web config will show up there in your, or this entry will show up in your web config in that auth section. What you'll want to do is whether or not to include JWT by default, i.e. just enable this endpoint or enable this authentication mechanism for all services. If you say false, then you'll have to go and specifically put some attributes in your service to enable it. If you say true, it'll automatically be enabled for all endpoints. You also want to set the SSL setting appropriate for whether you're using SSL or not. You really, and I can't stress this enough, if you're using JWT, it is going to pass a username and password across the wire for the first authentication call. So you do need to set this to force SSL true in your production environment.
Well, that's only if you don't care about your username and password being.
Yeah, if you don't mind username and passwords going across the wire unprotected, you know, you could leave that to false. But so anyway, so you'll make that change in web config, and then from a JavaScript perspective, so from a client call perspective, there'll be a new endpoint for login. There's likewise one for logging out. So this JWT auth API mobile login, right? This endpoint gets created by installing that package that I showed you before. We set the content type, application JSON, the data type, right? All those are normal. We set up cross-domain. There's some CORS things you'll want to set up if you're doing cross-domain calls, right? Which you are for mobile. We turn off credentials so that we're not passing cookies. And then what we're going to get back is we're going to get back a token. We're going to get back some garbled string that we can then use over and over again so that we don't have to pass username and password back and forth anymore. The other thing is that token also has, remember the point of JWT is to pass back and forth claims, right? So how do I get claims? How do I know, one, that this is a valid user, and two, what type of roles or what type of claims does DNN provide about that user, i.e. what roles is he in? And so there will be information in that token that you'll then be able to see, because it is just JSON that comes back. You'll be able to see, okay, he's in the administrator's role and he's in these other 3 roles, right? So your client side will then be able to react and render things differently based on what claims he has. And then when you're calling an API method, so here's an API for, say, a contact list, right? I'm not doing anything special here. I just turn off cookies. I didn't have to, but I can. And we set a request header, which passes that bearer token back in the authorization header. And in this case, we're setting something called monikers. We're not going to cover that today. Monikers just give us a quick way to link a tab ID and a module ID to a specific name. And we'll have some other documentation about that. But realistically, you're not having to do a lot of extra stuff to call these endpoints. And this is really the heart of everything we do for JWT, for a mobile app to be able to authenticate and then call secure web services in DNN. It's a very, very simple protocol, but still very secure. It is a protocol that should be run always over SSL. If you don't have SSL on your site, you should not use JWT. Okay, can't stress that enough. If you don't have SSL, don't use JWT. You will open yourself up to attack. And so when you call security or send an email to security and say, hey, I've been hacked and I'm using JWT and my site doesn't have SSL, there's not really a lot we're going to be able to do for you, other than tell you to go put SSL on it or stop using JWT. So that's the JWT feature. And there's actually an entire, one of the guys here did a full mobile application. This one happens to use Telerik's app builder platform. It's got lots of good documentation. Again, we'll have all of this documented on the documentation center when that comes out. But that's JWT. So that's the 5th feature. So we've got manifest, we've got settings, we've got our CSS changes, we've got JWT, and that's really awesome. Our image handler as well. So lots of good features for developers and designers in DNN 8. The last thing I want to talk about, and we're going to do this really quick, is Telerik. We made some breaking changes in DNN 8, and we're going to talk about those more in a blog post coming out tomorrow from Chris Patera. But this one I want to get out there today because it's something that if you have not done this already and you're using Telerik wrapper controls in your module, you need to go do this today. Don't wait till tomorrow. Don't wait till Thursday. Go do it this afternoon. Update your module to run using the new Telerik references in DNN 8. And there are a couple things here that you just need to be aware of, and that is DNN 8 runs on .NET Framework 4.5.1 and above. Technically, you could get away with running in 4.5. We're only claiming to support 4.5.1. We are not testing in 4.5. If you're running in 4.5 and something breaks, your only option is to upgrade to 4.5.1 because we are not going to support 4.5. So 4.5.1 and higher. So migrate your module to use 4.5 to build against 4.5.1. You'll need to update any DNN libraries that you reference in your module to use the corresponding DNN 8 library, because all of the DNN 8 libraries are compiled against the appropriate .NET framework. And then you're going to need to add this .NET-Nuke.Web.Deprecated DLL. What we did is took all of the wrapper controls for Telerik, moved them out of the .NET-Nuke.Web assembly into this deprecated assembly. So everything referencing Telerik is now in this assembly. In either the next major release of DNN coming out later this year, we will completely get rid of Telerik in the core platform. But if you compile against this deprecated assembly, then you'll be able to continue to use the deprecated assembly and Telerik DLL, and your module will continue to function, even though it may not ship pre-installed in DNN. You'll still be able to go to the available extensions, install and install the Telerik stuff, and you'll get all the right references, and you won't have to recompile. So the only breaking change for Telerik should be here in DNN 8. There should be no breaking changes after that for anything related to Telerik. Last step is to update your control references in your module. So if you add references that referenced the web controls namespace, you'll need to update that assembly, right, to use the deprecated assembly. So this is it. This is everything you have to do. Recompile your module and run it, and everything should work exactly the same as it did before. So it's not a lot of work. You can do this for most modules in 2 or 3 minutes and just rebuild. Now, that does mean that you will have a DNN 8 specific version of your module. You're not going to be able to distribute a single module that targets DNN 8 and DNN 7. So you have to have a DNN 8 specific version if you want to continue to use the Telerik wrappers. So, 5 different features and 1 breaking change, and I think that's it for what we want to talk about today with DNN 8.
Well, and just to clarify one thing, if people haven't heard this before, you know, the phrase breaking change has a very bad connotation, but, you know, it's something that doesn't happen very often in the DNN ecosystem, not intentionally anyway. And in this particular case, it was something. This is something that the community at large is basically applauding. We just can't hear them right now. So you know, like, just like in maybe one sentence, because we don't have really any time left. We're already over, and I know you had a hard stop.
Yep.
But what does this do for us as a community, being able to deprecate this and whatnot?
Well, it effectively means that when we actually remove it out of the core platform here in the next release or so, that we'll actually have a much smaller core package. It also means that we won't have, so Telerik actually loads a lot of JavaScript and a lot of other things on every page load just because we're using the Telerik Ajax panel in our pages. So we're ultimately going to end up with lighter weight pages. We're going to end up with a much smaller package size. Telerik that we ship with today probably bloats our DNN install packages by about 20 to 30 megs, which for a 50 meg package, having over half of that dedicated to Telerik controls is quite a big, hefty lift for people who aren't using Telerik anymore. You know, we're paying a little bit of a penalty for having to deliver that. So anyway, that's really everything that I had for today, and I think we will have some more discussion on Thursday on our webinar on Thursday with Will Morganweck and myself. So apparently this is the week that I do a bunch of talks with Will and Will. Join us Thursday. Yeah, the real Will and Will Morganweck.
Exactly. Yes.
And so join us Thursday we're going to focus more on the feature side of DNN and Evoke, less on the developer stuff. So we'll talk a little bit about skins. We'll talk about some of the other features that we had in DNN, and also about some of the features that are in the new Evoke 8.3 release that comes out this week. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Will, did you have anything else?
Next month we'll be talking to Joe Craig and at least maybe one other guest about DNN Con coming up in April. But other than that, thanks everybody for watching. And if you want to be a guest or know of somebody you think should be a guest, just let me know. And I'll go ahead and contact them if you're not comfortable with nominating them. We're looking for somebody in, I think, April and beyond. But other than that, we'll get these posted up as soon as possible. So thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. Bye.